Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live broadcast, using selectivity to optimize resolution for improved LC and LCMS method development with superficially porous particles. I'm Laura Bush, the Editorial Director of LCGC, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. We're pleased to bring you this webcast presented by LCGC and sponsored by MacMod. A company should be able to condense its mission statement into a simple phrase. MacMod's mission statement is smarter chromatography. But you may ask, just what does smarter chromatography mean? It means that when they make a recommendation to you about an HPLC or UHPLC product, it's to partner with you to offer innovative solutions to your complex problems. They use advanced, state-of-the-art analytical software to match their product portfolio with your separation needs. They leverage their 30-plus years of experience in the LC column business, their technical expertise, and their manufacturing network to help you solve your toughest application problems. The company provides up-to-date and accurate technical catalogs and reports from industry-leading separation scientists to keep you informed of new technologies. Before we get started today, I just have a few housekeeping announcements. First, the webcast is designed to be interactive, so we encourage you to ask questions. You can submit questions at any time by typing them in the Q&A box, which you can find on the right-hand side of your screen. You can enlarge the slide window by clicking on the small square icon in the upper right-hand corner of the slide window, or by hovering your mouse over the lower right-hand corner and dragging the window to the desired size. The slides will advance automatically during the webcast. And if you have any technical problems viewing or hearing the presentation, please click on the question mark Help widget in the dock at the bottom of your window. I would now like to introduce today's speaker. We are very pleased to be joined today by Stephanie Schuster. Stephanie Schuster earned her BA at LaSalle University and her PhD at Drexel University under the guidance of Professor Joe Foley. After graduation, Stephanie spent 9 months at Atlantic Diagnostic Laboratories, a combined clinical and forensic testing laboratory. She then joined Advanced Materials Technology, or AMT, as a research scientist working with Dr. Jack Kirkland, providing contributions to the commercial development of products designed specifically for the separation of peptides and proteins. Most recently, as the applications manager, Stephanie has been developing applications that highlight beneficial features for both existing and newly introduced HPLC and UHPLC columns by AMT. She's primarily interested in the development of separations and novel materials for chromatographic applications. Stephanie has published several peer-reviewed articles and is a member of the Chromatography Forum of the Delaware Valley. Stephanie, thanks for joining us today. Please get us started.
Thank you, Laura, for the introduction, and thanks for everyone who's joining us today. Really happy that I have the opportunity to talk about selectivity and in particular with superficially porous particles. So here's a brief outline of the presentation. First, I'll describe selectivity. Then I'll talk about the parameters that influence selectivity, followed by method screening examples, and then we'll follow with summary and conclusions. So first off, what is selectivity? So selectivity, or alpha, is also known as separation factor. This is the space between peaks in an HPLC separation. And I have an example here below. It's measured as the ratio of retention factors, or K, between neighboring peaks, and is always 1 or greater. So it's defined as the later eluting peak retention factor divided by the earlier eluting peak. And in the example I'm showing here, the measured selectivity between peaks 3 and 4 is a selectivity of 2.11. So you might be thinking, oh, that's great and all, but how does that really help my separations? Well, the interesting part is the effect of selectivity on resolution is much greater than the other two terms that comprise the resolution equation. So you can see here, I have the resolution equation, which starts off with an efficiency term where N is plates, selectivity where selectivity is symbolized by alpha, and then retention where the retention factor is symbolized by K. So if you first direct your attention to the right-hand plot, we're plotting here resolution versus alpha, and in this range between 1 and 2 for alpha, you can see that that relationship is nearly linear. And now if you direct your attention to the left-hand plot, you can see how once you're beyond a resolution of, say, 0.7 or 0.6, the selectivity really dominates the resolution, its impact on resolution, more so than plates N, which is here plotted in blue, or retention factor K, which is plotted in green. So whatever you can do to really optimize your selectivity will really improve your resolution for your final separation. So there are several parameters that influence selectivity. Mobile phase, what I mean by mobile phase is the organic component of the mobile phase, whether that's acetonitrile, methanol, or THF. And I've starred the ones that are more effective at influencing selectivity, just so you know which ones have more impact. The next parameter is column type. And what I mean by that is not particle morphology, but more so what bonded phase are you using for your column, whether it's an alkyl phase or a phenyl phase or an embedded amide. Those types of things impact selectivity. The next parameter is pH of the mobile phase. And really, it's important to control the pH, especially for ionizable compounds. So I'll show an example of that. The next parameter is temperature. You can see I don't have a star by that. That is not quite as effective at influencing selectivity, but for certain phases, it can be used. Then ion pair concentration, %B organic solvent, or gradient slope if you're running in gradient mode, and then finally buffer concentration. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to focus on the first 4 parameters. And just a reminder of superficially porous particles. These are composed of a solid silica core. In this example, the solid silica core is shown as the gold center there on the left. And this particular particle is 1.7 micron core size, surrounded by a half micron thick porous shell, and for a total particle size of 2.7 microns. Both the shell thickness and pore size are tightly controlled, so we can change the total particle size, the core size, and the shell thickness, as well as the porosity. On the bottom left-hand side, what you see there is an SEM of a fully porous particle, or FPP particle, and those particles have are porous throughout, and what that means is the diffusion path for molecules can be as much as to the center of that particle. Now, turn your attention to the halo 90 angstrom 2.7 micron particle. This is a focused ion beam SEM image of the particle, and what you can see, the difference between the superficially porous particle is that the diffusion path is much shorter. And what that means is the advantages of SPP columns, or superficially porous particle columns, you're getting fast, efficient separations, lower back pressure compared to fully porous sub-2 micron particle columns. And normally these superficially porous particle columns have larger inlet frits, so they're less likely to plug. So all the separations shown today in this presentation will be using halo fused core particles. So first I'd like to talk about the effect of mobile phase on selectivity. So this is using an example of glucocorticoids, and those are steroid hormones that are good at reducing inflammation and suppressing the immune system. What we are comparing here in the first chromatogram in blue is using 100% acetonitrile on the B channel, and the trouble is we're getting coelutions of peaks 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and but we are getting good peak shape. In separation number 2, what we're using is 100% methanol. And for that, you can see we've now obtained baseline resolution for peaks 1 and 2, the prednisone and the cortisone. We're doing better for peaks 3 and 4, but we're not quite at baseline resolution with a resolution of 1.2. And then peaks 5 and 6 are still okay. So then on the bottom chromatogram, number 3, which is the trace in red, what you can see is we're now getting that baseline resolution between peaks 3 and 4, the prednisolone and the hydrocortisone, with a resolution of 1.7. So not only are we getting baseline resolution, but a nice compromise in terms of the total retention time compared to when the 100% methanol was used on channel B. There are some, of course, advantages and disadvantages to using acetonitrile or methanol. So acetonitrile is a polar aprotic solvent that has lower viscosity and a lower UV cutoff compared to methanol. So a lot of people will use acetonitrile first, compared to methanol, which is a polar protic solvent. This is less toxic and less expensive than acetonitrile, so it is always recommended that you screen both acetonitrile and methanol when you're doing your method development. So next I'd like to talk about the halo phases for reverse phase HPLC and UHPLC. This is a table listing the halo bonded phase, its structure, the chemistry, and the types of interactions. So for the first three, C18, C30, and C8, these are all in the alkyl chemistry family, and they all have hydrophobic interactions. For AQC18, the chemistry here is both alkyl and polar characteristics, and so we have mainly hydrophobic interactions and some dipole-dipole interactions. For phenylhexyl, we have both aromatic and alkyl chemistry there, and it has hydrophobic and pi-pi interactions. The biphenyl is next, and you can see that's purely aromatic. It also participates in pi-pi and hydrophobic interactions. Following biphenyl, we have the RP amide, which is an embedded amide phase. We have called it has polar chemistry and both alkyl characteristics. And it has hydrogen bonding and hydrophobic interactions. Next, we have the ES cyano. The ES stands for extra stable. And that's because this particular bonded phase is sterically protected. And it's mainly polar chemistry, which has dipole-dipole interactions and hydrophobic interactions. And then finally, the PFP phase has both aromatic and polar characteristics and has the most types of interactions, both hydrophobic, pi-pi, dipole-dipole, and hydrogen bonding. So like I had previously described on the last slide, we've classified the halo phases by their chemistries. And you can see, starting at the bottom left here, there's a polar section, which for a polar, we would say that the chemistry contains either an embedded amide, cyanophase, or fluorine. And in the solely polar category is the ESCN phase. In the overlap section between polar chemistries and aromatic, we have the PFP phase. Solely aromatic is the biphenyl phase. In the overlap section between aromatic and alkyl, we have phenylhexyl. And then solely alkyl is C18, C8, and C30. And then finally, in the overlap section between the alkyl and polar phases are the AQC18 and the RP amide bonded phases. So we've grouped the phases like this in order to help people recognize which phases have similar chemistries. And when they're looking to do method screening, what we recommend is that they pick phases from different parts of these chemistries. So I'll show some examples of that in a little bit. So we do have selectivity differences among the halo phases, and what we're showing here is the hydrophobic subtraction model. So numerous methods for characterizing stationary phases have been developed, including the hydrophobic subtraction model. And we have 5 different parameters here: H, S star, A, B, and C, and these are all used to measure the physicochemical properties of a chromatographic bonded phase, where H is the hydrophobicity of the phase, S star is the resistance of the stationary phase to penetration by a solute molecule, A is the hydrogen bond acidity of the phase, B is the hydrogen bond basicity of the phase, and C is the interaction of the phase with ionized solute molecules, and that's measured at both pH 2.8 and 7. The combination of those parameters, along with the parameters that characterize a solute, is then related to the solute's retention, and that's the Kx in the equation at the top there, relative to the retention of ethylbenzene. That's the Keb. So these types of characterizations were first done by Snyder and Company, and they have since been taken over by White-Stoll. So for those who are interested in comparing the stationary phases that they have, they can either go to hplccolumns.org for the parameters, or they can visit the USP website. So here I have a table listing all the halo phases, their USP type, and then the hydrophobic subtraction parameters. So what's done is this first column, the F sub S, is used to calculate whether the phases are considered equivalent or orthogonal. And when I say equivalent, that means they would give similar selectivity. So when you have an F sub S value less than 12, the two phases are considered equivalent. And for our purposes, we consider halo C8 and halo AQ-C18 equivalent selectivity to halo C18. When the F sub S value is greater than 12, those two phases are considered orthogonal or different. So for instance, if you look at the F sub S value for halo biphenyl, it calculates 26.76. So the higher the F sub S value, the more different or orthogonal the bonded phases. And this next slide shows an example of using halo C18 compared to halo biphenyl for a mix of 12 beta blockers. And beta blockers are mainly used for treating irregular heartbeats and high blood pressure. So if you notice the first part of the separation, peaks 1 through 6, you're not seeing very much selectivity differences. There are some increased spacings on the bottom trace, the green, which is the halo biphenyl. But the interesting part about this comparison are the middle peaks, peaks 7 through 11. You can see some clear elution order changes and some better selectivity. So this was using a gradient from 10 to 50% acetonitrile water with 0.1% TFA. And so peak 7, the oxaprenolol, is more retained, as is the labetalol, as is the propranolol on the halo biphenyl phase. And what we have seen from screening different compounds on the biphenyl phase is that for polar compounds, it does tend to be more retentive. So this is one way that you can optimize your resolution just by changing out the bonded phase. Here's another example using phase screening with constant conditions. And what we're looking at here is known as paracetamol in Europe or acetaminophen in the United States. So this particular method is from the EP for paracetamol and its related impurities. The method was designed on the halo C18 phase, so that's why we're seeing better resolution and separations on halo C18, but we were curious what would happen if we ran the same conditions on both the halo RP-amide and the halo phenylhexyl. So I'd like to draw your attention to the separation of peaks A and B on the halo C18 and compare that to the elution order change on halo phenylhexyl. So these two compounds, A is N2-hydroxyphenylacetamide and B is N4-hydroxyphenylpropanamide. And you can see how similar these two structures are and how in the case of the C18 it's better able to resolve these two compounds. If you go back. A and B are better resolved on C18 compared to phenylhexyl, but it's interesting that you get that elution order change. Just as an example of a selectivity difference. The other compounds I'd like to point out are impurities F and M on the halo C18 compared to F and M on the halo RP-amide. So what you can immediately see is that F and M are both more retained on the halo RP-amide. And if you take a closer look at the structures of those two, F is 4-nitrophenol and M is 4' azane dilyl diphenyl. And what we have noticed for RP-amide is that it has more retention for phenol-containing compounds compared to the C18. So in this example, of course, we had some coelutions here at E, G, and F, but for other mixes, these increased retention could be an advantage. The next example here is phase screening with constant conditions for alpha, beta, gamma, and delta tocopherols. So if you direct your attention to the bottom right-hand corner, I have the generic tocopherol structure here, and this tocopherol is vitamin E. So the interesting part is that the only difference between beta and gamma tocopherol are the positions of the methyl group and the hydrogen. So in beta, the methyl group is at position R1, and in gamma, the methyl group is at position R2. So what we've done is we've screened this mix of tocopherols on halo C30, halo C18, and halo PFP. And what you might think is, oh, there's very much more retention of halo C18 compared to C30. What's going on there? So since the halo C30 is a very long silane, we've decided to bond that on our larger pore size particle, the 160 angstrom pore size. So since it has a bigger pore size, it has less surface area, and that's the reason why there's less retention for the halo C30 compared to halo C18. But the interesting thing is, even with all of its extra retention, the halo C18 is not able to resolve the gamma and beta forms of tocopherol, whereas the halo C30 is able to do that separation. And then looking at the bottom halo PFP separation, you see that there's an elution order change between the beta and the gamma forms of tocopherol there, and the separation time is even lower than what it was on halo C30. So depending on your separation needs, you could select either the halo C30 or the halo PFP for this particular analysis. I also want to point out that these separations were conducted at subambient temperatures, so we used 10 degrees in order to get the best resolution. Next, I'd like to talk about LCMS screening of drugs of abuse and metabolites. In this particular slide, we're looking at phenylhexyl, biphenyl, and C18. And what I've put the phenylhexyl on top because it was showing the best resolution of the different peaks compared to halobiphenyl and halo C18. You can see that there are some selectivity differences across these three phases, and the halophenylhexyl is able to resolve more of these drugs of abuse and metabolites. We also screened the same mix on halo-rpamide and halo C30. What you can see is that most of the peaks are coming out at the beginning part of the chromatogram, and the resolution isn't quite as good as what we had seen for the halophenylhexyl. So we've also done screening for 14 different steroids. In this example, we've used an Agilent 1200, which is a 600 bar system. We put it in low delay volume configuration with the pulse dampener bypassed. We used the automatic delay volume reduction, and we've used the shortest ID of tubing and minimal length, except in the case of the needle seat where that ID was 0.007 inches. We swapped out for a smaller flow cell. In this case, we used the 2 microliter flow cell with a path length of 6 millimeters. The injection volume was 1 microliter, and like I said, this was screening a mix of 14 different steroids. So first I'll talk about the screening results using acetonitrile and water. The K-star for all of these was 12. The box on the right-hand side are the number of peaks that we identified out of the 14 target compounds. And in terms of conditions, we're using the 2 micron halo particles, except in the case of C30, which is available in 2.7 micron. Wherever you see these gold highlighted peaks, that's where we believe we have coelutions. So you can see, looking at halo C18 on the top compared to halo C30, we are beginning to resolve some more peaks. Just one additional peak with the halo C30 compared to C18. And in terms of the selectivity between halo C18 and the bottom AQ C18, the separation is pretty similar, except for a coelution that occurs a little more than halfway through the separation. We've also looked at, this is the same steroid mix, now also with acetonitrile, looking at halo-rpamide. On the top here, we were able to identify 13 of the 14 peaks. You can see they're not all baseline resolved, but the separation definitely has promise. And then the middle here is phenylhexyl, which has not quite as much retention as the halo-rpamide. And then on the bottom here, at the time, we didn't use a 50 millimeter length column. We had a 30 millimeter length column available, so we had used that. But even on a 30 millimeter length column, we're able to get some promising results with the PFP phase. Now here's the steroid mixture with screening gradients using methanol and water. And in this case, again, the gold highlighted peaks are where we have coelutions. and the numbers in boxes on the right-hand side are the number of peaks that we've identified. So in terms of, again, comparing the C18 on the top to the Halo C30 in the middle, you can see the selectivity is very similar, except for there are different spots of coelutions. And then looking at the C18 compared to the AQ C18 on the bottom, you can see the retention is greater on Halo C18 for the beginning part of the chromatogram, and it actually throughout the whole chromatogram compared to the AQ C18. So we've also looked at the rp-amide, phenylhexyl, and PFP. Again, the PFP column length was a 30 millimeter. So looking at the same mix of 14 steroids, you can see that, again, even though the PFP was the shortest column, we were able to identify 13 of the 14 different steroids. So the PFP would be a good candidate for further optimization. And the next screening sample that we had used was a mix of 19 different flavonoids. And the flavonoids here listed in gold highlighted are the isobaric flavonoids. So those that have the same mass. So in this case, we screened acetonitrile and water, again with C18, AQC18, and rp-amide, and we're able to identify 17 unique peaks for the C18 phase, and also 17 peaks for AQC18, and in the bottom chromatogram, we're able to identify 19 different peaks using the rp-amide phase. In terms of the biphenyl on the top here, we have solutions, so we're only able to count 16 peaks of the flavonoids. The middle chromatogram for phenylhexyl, we also saw 16 different peaks, and the bottom chromatogram with PFP phase, we identified 17 different peaks. Now this is where we've switched from acetonitrile to methanol for the screening gradient. For Halo C18, we identified 20 different peaks. Some of those might include impurities. For AQC18, we identified 12 different peaks, and for rp-amide, we've identified 16 different peaks. Continuing on with methanol, we can see the biphenyl phase compared to the phenylhexyl here in the middle. We're able to identify 18 different peaks for biphenyl, 17 for phenylhexyl, and then 19 for PFP. So again, the PFP and biphenyl would be phases to consider for further optimization. So now I'd like to switch gears and talk about the effect of pH on selectivity. So here in the top chromatogram, we're showing the effect of what happens when a compound is ionized at a pH that is higher than its pKa. So peak 2, which is nitrophenol, you can see that it has increased retention when we go to pH 2, because at pH 2 it isn't ionized, and whereas compared to compounds 1 and 3, they aren't affected by a change in pH because they're pKs are much higher than necessary to ionize those. And then finally, the effect of temperature on selectivity. So here, what we're showing is the separation of vitamin K1 in both its trans and cis forms. So I have the trans form here structure on the top, and the cis form structures on the bottom. This is using a Halo C30 column at different temperatures, and what you can see is peak 1, which is the trans form of vitamin K1, which is biologically active, becomes more resolved from peak 2 as you go to lower temperatures. So it may not look like it, but separation A, which was run at 35 degrees, had a resolution of 1.53, compared to when the separation is run at 15 degrees, the resolution is 3.03. And this is something that's unique to the C30 phase, where we get better resolution as we go to lower temperatures. So then, in terms of summary and conclusions, screening both acetonitrile and methanol-containing mobile phases with one column or a set of orthogonal columns is a good start for method development. The selection of an appropriate pH for the analytes of interest is critical for ionizable compounds. Once the stationary phase, organic solvent, and pH are selected, we suggest varying the temperature and gradient time, and then using a commercially available method optimization software package is recommended. While C18 is a good all-purpose phase for initial method development, the other phases offer alternate selectivities. And finally, it's good practice to screen multiple phases to ensure the best possible separation. So we do have some technical resources. MacMod Analytical is the exclusive distributor of Halo columns in the US, and here I have listed their website. We do have some acknowledgments. I'd like to thank the team at Advanced Materials Technology, in particular Stephanie Rosenberg, Connor McHale, and Andrew Harron, who's they've all contributed to this data set, and then the team at MacMod Analytical, including Alex, Tom, and Jeff. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to you, Laura.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for that informative presentation. Before we get started with the question and answer period, I would like to ask everyone in the audience to participate in 2 brief polling questions. In each case, please click directly on your screen to enter your answers. So here's the first question. Would you be interested in a personal consultation on your method development of urine analytes using Halo columns? Yes or no? So again, you can click directly on the screen to enter your answer. And that question is, would you be interested in a personal consultation on your method development of your analytes using Halo columns? Yes or no? Okay. Thank you very much for taking that question. We'll move to our second question. From which manufacturer do you currently source your columns for small molecule separations? Waters, Agilent, Phenomenex, Toso Bioscience, Merck Millipore, Thermo Fisher Scientific. And once again, please click directly on the screen to enter your answers. And that question is, from which manufacturer do you currently source your columns for small molecule separations? Waters, Agilent, Phenomenex, Toso Bioscience, Merck Millipore, or Thermo Fisher Scientific? All right, thank you very much for taking that polling question. It's now time to get started with a question and answer period. As a reminder, if you want to ask a question, you can do that by typing it in the Q&A box, which you can find on the right-hand side of your presentation window. So let's get started. So Stephanie, here's the first question. Do you have any comments on Halo columns for peptide separations?
Oh, sure. Well, we do have products for peptide separations. So, um, actually, that was one of the first products that I had worked on as when I started at AMT. So those are really near and dear to my heart, I would say. Um, we have different we have different particle sizes for peptide separations. Um, we have a sterically protected C18, a sterically protected cyanophase, and then also a phenylhexyl bonded phase. So if there, I'm not really sure what more uh, detail the listener would like, but we would be happy to provide additional information.
Great. What is allowing so much more effect on resolution with temperature with the C30 phase?
Okay, so the C30 phase is a little bit of a special case. It has shape selectivity properties, and it's sort of the alkyl chains, or more like they're frozen in place, or more like they're in a plastic state. So what happens is it has it's the silane itself is actually a solid at room temperature. So as you go to those lower temperatures, that enhances the phase even more. And so you have a lot of places for the analytes to interact on its surface. And I feel like that's what really helps it out as it goes to lower temperatures compared to other phases.
Excellent, thank you. What is the pH range of the columns?
That depends on the bonded phase. So typically it's pH 2 to pH 9, but if it's a sterically protected phase, it would be pH 1 to pH 8.
Excellent, thank you. If you could select only 3 halo phases to screen, which ones would you select and why?
Oh, good question. So I would definitely choose C18 because everyone loves C18, phenylhexyl and RP-amide. So I like the phenylhexyl and the RP-amide because as I hope I've described, those show different selectivity compared to C18, and having those three in your screening set should give you the best probability of success.
Excellent. What is the column life, for example, in terms of number of injections?
Oh, this is another great question. So I would say, really the column lifetime is going to depend on the conditions used, but we have users that have reported columns lasting for 8,000 injections. I don't know their conditions off the top of my head, but I know for a column manufacturer that's for the good and bad news because we want to sell you columns, but we're happy when the columns last.
Very good. What gives Halo PFP and Halo C30 their shape selective properties?
Oh, so for the shape selectivity, it's a little bit unclear about how that works for PFP because there haven't been as many studies, molecular modeling studies done with PFP, but we're not really sure exactly how that works. It's a little bit unclear how the PFP interacts with the solvent and the different solutes. But we do know that it clearly is there compared to other phases. In terms of the Halo C30, we think that since it's more like in a plastic state, that helps it give it its shape selectivity properties.
What are the advantages of using Halo columns for method screening and development?
So I would definitely say that with Halo columns, you can do faster method screening since you don't have to use very long columns. You could clearly use 50 millimeter lengths or 30 millimeter length columns. And since you're doing faster screening and development, that translates into solvent savings.
How stable are the Halo columns?
The columns are very stable, like I said. And it also depends on the conditions that the user is using for mobile phase and temperature. But like I said, there have been people who've used columns for 8,000 injections and even as high as 20,000 injections on the same column.
Fantastic. And what particle sizes are available on the Halo?
Oh, sure. So we offered 2, 2.7, and 5 micron particle sizes. We recommend the 2 and the 2.7 for UHPLC analysis, and of course all the particle sizes could be used for HPLC analysis depending on your system pressure and capability.
All right, very good. Well, with that, I think we'll wrap up. Stephanie, thanks again for your talk today and for answering all those questions.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
And I want to thank everyone in the audience for attending and participating in the event today. And I'd like to thank our sponsor, MacMod, for making today's webcast possible. You'll receive an email alerting you when this webcast is available for replay. We invite you to forward that announcement to your colleagues who might have missed today's live event. We hope to see you all next time. Goodbye.